facing development challenges on a global scale.
Today, 40 out of 56 million deaths
are attributable
to non-communicable diseases
such as heart disease, stroke, chronic respiratory disease, and diabetes.
Over 800,000 people
die by suicide every year.
In the Philippines, 5 out of 10 families in 2017
were deprived of basic education.
Nang dahil sa kahirapan, maraming pamilya ang napipilitang pahintuin
sa pag-aaral ang kanilang mga anak.
In remote areas, public transportation is inaccessible.
Children have to cross rivers and climb hills
with their books and bags just to go to school.
Philippines ranked third in the top 10 countries with the most natural disasters for the years 2005 to 2014.
Driven by the goal to achieve sustainable future for all by 2030, the UN identified and adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, to address the global challenges we face. This can only be achieved through a collaborative effort of all countries and stakeholders.
Aligned with the ATRAM's mission to engage, inspire, and collaborate
to build a financially secure future,
we are committed to building that future where no one is left behind.
We have adopted 3 out of the 17 SDGs,
aiming to make a positive impact,
as well as ingraining more responsible
and sustainable business practices within ATRAM.
Good health and well-being ensures healthy lifestyle and promotes well-being for all ages. Quality education ensures inclusive and equitable quality education and promotes lifelong learning opportunities for all. Climate action takes urgent action to combat climate change and its adverse impacts. With these goals, a sustainable future is possible, a future where no one is left behind.
The time is now, more than ever, that we must work together
to achieve the global goals in ensuring healthy lives, improving access to education,
and fighting climate crisis.
We at ATRAM declare full support to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Let's start today. Let's invest in a sustainable future together.
Invest to thrive. Invest together.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Philippines Reopening, the Future of Retail. This is part of ATRAM's exclusive and ongoing webinar interview series with some of the top business minds in the country. Today, we are honored to have as our guest Mr. Steven Tan, President and Chief Executive Officer of SM Supermalls. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that you may ask questions throughout the discussion by clicking on the Q&A button on your screen. We will get to as many questions as we can at the latter part of the discussion. Additionally, we'd like to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. Copies will be disseminated within the day, as well as posted on our social media pages. Today's moderator is tasked with overseeing the management of ATRAM's domestic stock market portfolios, spearheading the development of our equity investment process, and periodically sharing the firm's outlook on equities. Let me now hand the floor over to ATRAM's Head of Equities, Mr. Julian Tarrobago Jr.
Welcome to episode 7 of ATRAM's special webcast series, which gives you essentially a glimpse of the conversations we have with business leaders, which is a critical part of our due diligence process before we decide to invest or not to invest in companies or sectors, and sectors. Today, we gaze into the future of Philippine retail, that is. And we're super stoked to feature the young, spirited president and CEO of the Philippines' largest retailer, SM Supermalls, Steven Tan. But before that, let's reflect on the year 2020, given that this is kind of a year-ender anyway. So 2020, as the number implies, it's actually quite clear, it's crystal clear that this has been one heck of a roller coaster ride. From people making doomsday predictions on the economy back in April, to people stockpiling on toilet paper in some cases, to today, where the market was up considerably today, and we're actually seeing optimism emerge about the economy reopening, and that corporate earnings are slowly in recovery. This optimism has allowed Philippine equities to recover, with the PSEI now down only 8% on a year-to-date basis. But get this, the PSEI is only down 3% in US dollar terms, after free falling as much as 41% back in March. If you can remember that day earlier this year, market was down as much as 41%. Now it's actually down only 3% in US dollar terms. That said, today, December 3, was actually a special day. It was an important day. Why? Because with the announcement that the Philippine unemployment rate actually ended lower compared to the past report. Unemployment rate in the Philippines was at 8.7% in October. This was good news, actually, implying that our worst case scenarios for the economy have now become unlikely. While we still closely monitor asset quality risk in the banking sector, the lower unemployment rate means that economic damage in the Philippines has probably not worsened, and that the recovery process across sectors, there were sequential improvements we saw in the third quarter. These improvements will likely continue and flow into actual earnings improvements. If you recall, in past webinars, we've mentioned that we actually forecast earnings to rebound after dropping by about 40% this year, or 39% this year. We're looking at corporate earnings to rebound by about 45% in 2021. This is driven by reopening of the economy and election-related spending in the second half of next year. Now, barring external shocks, these fundamentally support a return of net foreign buying and can potentially boost the PSEI towards 8,300 points. That's upside of about 17% from where we're at, or towards a price-earnings ratio of about 19 times projected 2021 earnings. Note that in past upcycle recoveries, stocks in sectors that benefit from reopening usually fare well. In this case, conglomerates or holding companies. Reopening also benefits property companies and construction companies and consumer retailers. So consumer retailers. This leads us now back to our featured guest. We are honored to feature today Steven Tan, the President and CEO of SM Supermalls, the Philippines' largest retailer, with average foot traffic of about 3.5 million people per day. They also have about 5,000 tenant partners across 60 malls in the Philippines, 60 malls in the Philippines, and 7 in China. Hope I got the numbers right, Steven. Steven was promoted from Chief Operating Officer to CEO and President in January this year to lead the SM Group during a period of, and this may be understating things, shifting consumer behavior. Aside from successfully launching SM's premium malls, Mall of Asia, SM Aura Premier, and the Podium in Ortigas, Steven was head of operations of SM's Philippine and China malls. Now, in terms of life before SM, Steven completed his master's in business administration from the Paris School of Management, and then he began his career as a hotelier in Taipei and Shanghai. So, Paris, Taipei, and Shanghai. This must have been a blast for him, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I understand Steven is an avid traveler. So, without further delay, let's get to it. Let's go meet the man, Steven Tan. Welcome to the webcast, Steven.
Good afternoon, Jun. How are you?
Doing well. Excited, super stoked for this opportunity to pick your brains and to understand the state of the Philippine retail sector and what the SM Group is doing and thinking. So Yeah, how are you and how's the family?
Well, good. Yeah. Well, today I am truly honored that I'm invited today by ATRAM to be part of this webinar series. No, and excited at the same time, but still nervous.
Well, that makes two of us. But it's a pleasure and it's an honor. Before we get down to business, there's quite a lot of topics I would like to discuss with you. But before that, I mentioned that our understanding is you love travel. You're an avid traveler. So I'm curious, how are you dealing with today's travel restrictions or restricted travel?
Nowadays you can only travel locally. I was in Baguio a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to Balisin by the end of the year. So local muna. Anyway, there's still a lot of areas that we can explore locally, and this year's theme anyway is go local, travel local, sport local.
Awesome. Yeah. So once the restriction, yeah, absolutely agree. Going local first, I think that's a strong theme also for retailers this year. It's the focus on domestic
Consumption.
driven consumption.
Yes.
Local first before we go outside. But I'm curious also, once restrictions are full blown opened up, where would you like to go?
you know, um, this year's plan was totally changed. No, I was supposed to be in Georgia and Armenia, mid this year, and then 2 months ago I was supposed to join a cruise, a Mediterranean cruise in the island of Greece and Italy, but it didn't push through. But if I would be given a chance to travel, my first destination most probably would be one of my favorite cities in the world, Tokyo.
Wow. Again, that makes two of us. I love Tokyo, I love the food, and people are so nice.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes. And
well,
I would feel more at home maybe to travel in Asia first, because earlier this year I was in or late February I was in London and Paris, no, and I felt that they were, of course that was during the early stage of the pandemic, and nobody knew what it was, no, so and they thought that this is an Asian disease or an Asian virus. Some people call it as, and they couldn't distinguish between Chinese people and Filipino or Malaysian. All Asians for them look the same. So you feel a little bit hesitation from the French people and the English people and taking you in their cabs and in their restaurants. I felt it that way. So maybe when the restrictions open up, uh, Tokyo first.
nice. It's not a bad idea. I'll tell my wife that. Tokyo first. So, um, quite as I mentioned earlier, quite a roster of beautiful places on your list: Georgia, Armenia, Greece, Italy. Uh, I understand the beauty of the culture and all of these places, but I'm also interested to know what about travel is it that you really love?
Um, you know, I'm a wanderlust, and by traveling, you really learn a lot. No, I open up your eyes, you open up your senses, and there's so much that you could absorb. It also makes you more wider, your perspective in life wider. And sometimes I could also apply it. In my work, like if I travel to Tokyo, there's always new discoveries in London and in Paris and in New York. There are new brands popping up. There are new ways to do retail. So that is something that I'm always fascinated about. No, how innovative some people could be, or some brands could be, that you could most probably bring it also into a local context here in the Philippines.
Wow, that's amazing and interesting because this love for travel and as mentioned earlier, your life before SM, you were a hotelier,
Yes.
and your love for we talked about food also earlier. I believe um, this is all about the great or the unique experience. I mean, that's kind of like what I'm getting from you as well. So how is this? How have these helped you in terms of stepping into your role as the president and CEO of the nation's largest retailer?
Okay. Prior to joining SM, no, I was in the hotel industry for more than 10 years, huh? And I started from the ranks. I joined a Hilton Taipei. That was my first job, waiting tables. Well, that's part of the management program that I entered into, no, after graduation. So um, I think what that has helped me put into context on customer service and customer experience. We all know that hotels, especially five-star hotels, give very much importance and weight on what's the experience of the customers would be when they step into a five-star hotel. So we're trying to also see if we could, convert that experience, not necessarily, you have a butler service or anything, but making it easy, making it pleasurable, making it satisfying when they enter an SM malls. No, service is not just about saying hello, hi, goodbye, welcome. It's about and when they enter your shopping center, it has to be seamless. It has to be you should not find it difficult to navigate. The air condition should be comfortable. You have enough seating. You have enough choices to select. I mean, it a wide array of selection. So these are all part and parcel of also what I've learned, in my previous job. No, whenever I travel, I also try to see what customer experience, what unique customer experience I could bring to SM.
That's quite a lot, actually. I mean, that customer service background, and that experience to have to be able to bring that to consumer, there has to be. It seems like the thread here is connection as well. You seem to have, based on your background and what I've heard about you as well, is that you have that connection with the consumer or the customer. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that in a little while. In the meantime, I understand you're also an avid runner, and running is part of your daily regimen. In running, we need to stretch first. So here, usually we do a little bit of warm-ups, and in this particular case, I'm thinking maybe we do a short game of trivia if you're down for that.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
All right, so I'll just ask a few questions, and everyone, please participate. If you know the answer, I mean, answer the question, but just a few questions to warm up before we get into the ins and outs of the future of Philippine retail. So it's multiple choice. So I like multiple choice questions. So retail trivia. First, what was the first item to be sold on eBay? This is a retail trivia again. A ballpoint pen. B, toilet paper. C, a guitar pick. Or D, a laser printer. So what do you think, Steven?
A. I don't know.
Ballpoint pen. That was my answer earlier as well. It's actually D, a laser pointer.
Okay.
So I don't think a lot of people know the answer to that anyway. It's just maybe interesting to know. Which was the first US retailer to offer home delivery? A, Sears. B, Tiffany & Co. C, Coach. And D, 680 Home Appliances. People from the 80s might know that particular name.
680 Home Appliances?
That's an old Philippine name. So again, A, Sears. B, Tiffany & Co. C, Coach. And D, 680 Home Appliances.
Most probably Tiffany & Company.
That's right. Answer is B, Tiffany & Company. So first US retailer to offer home delivery. So number 3, in 2013, this fast food chain launched its first influencer. Sorry, which was the first fast food chain, which happened in 2013, that launched its first influencer campaign by sending branded jewelry to famous models and actresses? So options are A, Taco Bell. B, McDonald's. C, KFC. And D, Mang Inasal.
KFC.
Answer close? The answer was Taco Bell
Okay.
in 2013. So number 4, what year did Apple launch the iPod rather? A 2002, B 2000, C 2001, and D 2004.
2000.
Close. It was 2001. And then my
Okay.
last question for the trivia retail game: which famous actress installed a mini mall in her own basement? Why she would do that, I'm not sure why, but apparently one famous actress did install a mini mall in her own basement. So options: A, Jennifer Aniston; B, Barbara Streisand; C, Vilma Santos; and D, Marilyn Monroe.
Barbara Streisand.
That's correct. So B, Barbara Streisand. So yeah, now that we're warmed up, seems like a good time to check in on the state of Philippine retail. Thank you for participating, Steven. My first question is, instead of doing an overall check-in, we'll hit the individual points instead of having an overall a general question. Maybe for starters, would be interested to know, how do you think the Philippine consumer has changed over the last 8 months?
Okay. I think people are now more used to different channels of shopping, no? So it's not just no longer brick and mortar, but they also use online shopping. But they also have, some people would also ask for personal shopper, just like what we're doing in some of our malls, no? They have gone into personal shopper assistants. They call in, they use Viber, they use the marketplace. So it's all about options. So people are more they are not just focused into one way of shopping, but multiple ways of shopping. That, I think, has generally changed the retail landscape in the Philippines, no? And also, they are exposed to a lot of new brands. A lot of people, or a lot of even home bakers, there's a lot of Viber community that offers a lot of products, no? Whether it's the burnt cheesecake from Basque, or it's your new cassava vendor. Before, it used to be only you can only find, you go into the mall, then the tenants would change. Sometimes you have this cart, but no longer now. Nowadays, you also have a lot of home bakers, a lot of, and also with the retailers, no, a lot of changes has happened, no. They have innovated a lot, no. So which is good for us, good for everyone, no, because towards the end, it's the consumers who win. There are more options, there are more varieties, and people are more it's more exciting.
Thanks, Steven. So more options for the consumer as compared to before, more channels for
Yes.
getting the goods as well. So how about the metrics or the variables, the economic variables that affect consumer behavior? Specifically, how about income? How about spending? And how about savings? How do you see these as affecting the consumer this
Okay.
year?
Because yes, it affects us directly, no, because as we all know that Philippine is a consumer driven economy. So whatever the remittances, OFW remittances, all this affect the way people spend, no. So definitely there is, if ever that the unemployment rate would go up, then it definitely will affect. So there's a direct correlation between the economy and consumers.
Thanks, Steven. Could you so maybe philosophical question before we go into maybe some numbers or pulse of mall traffic and all that. Before that, curious as to, I mean, in our past conversations, I remember you saying shopping is your cardio. I
Yeah.
mean, what is, I mean, being an avid shopper as well, or loving to shop. I mean, how has all this changed the psyche of shopping? I mean, I read somewhere that I read a question somewhere that it's either are humans logical beings having emotional experiences, or are humans, in shopping terms, of course, or are humans emotional beings having logical experiences when it comes
Right?
to shopping? What's it?
I think both. Both people, humans are both logical and at the same time emotional. Why? Because logical, especially nowadays, no, during the pandemic, no, they are more cautious in their spending because they don't know what the future holds. A lot of people are still they still don't know what will happen by 2021 or 2022. So people are more cautious about how they spend. They tend to also compare prices, right? They check online and they shop on offline, or they check offline and they shop online. No, so there's a lot of these things going on right now. But at the same time, people are also emotional shopper, especially also nowadays, because people want to feel good. People want to feel good. They want to feel comfort and also self-expression, especially nowadays. No, that's why if you would see, pizza sells a lot. Why? Because it makes them feel good. That is emotional shopping.
So some caution, and at the same time shopping because it makes them, they want to feel good. In that sense, let me segue into some data, maybe, if it's okay to get the pulse of shopping in your malls. Could you talk about mall traffic in the SM malls, your pulse of that, and how is Christmas shaping up? I mean, we're in December. This is usually a festive. It still is, I think, but uh, people are out. How is Christmas shaping up under this period of quarantine, and mall traffic update if possible?
You know, in
Thank
the
you.
beginning of the pandemic, it was not good at all. When we had to close down, you remember we closed down, I think, around March 16 or 17. And then we reopened our malls partially mid-May, no, May 16, no? During May 16, the footfall was very bad. It was only around less than 20% of the pre-COVID foot traffic, no? If you compare it year on year, no? We were only doing around 18 to 20% during that time, May, no? But we monitor this very closely, week on week. We check the footfall week on week, and it has steadily been increasing. There was a slight drop again by August because of the lockdown. You remember us going back into ECQ again for 2 weeks during August, but it went back up when the restriction was loosened. No, well, but the past few weeks has been very encouraging because we already see the footfall, more or less more than half already has gone back to the mall, but the sales figure has been very, very encouraging. We are hitting already around 60 to 70% of pre-pandemic sales. No, so we are very confident that this December would be a good month for everyone. As we all know, historically, December is the biggest month for retail. No, I was in Mega Mall last weekend, and there were a lot of shoppers. We are very happy about that. But of course, we still follow the IATF guidelines on strict social distancing protocols. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear that things are slowly improving. 60 to 7% of pre-pandemic is much better compared to the 20% you mentioned
Yes.
earlier when you guys started, in terms of the lockdown started, the footfall.
Yeah,
So
and Jun, I compare this year on year, meaning
Sure.
December, you compare it to last December.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Historically, of course, December is a very good month. So we compare it year on year. So we're quite happy with the outcome for the past few weeks.
Right. Thanks, Steven. What are the main trends you're seeing in terms of what they're buying, or I mean, I'm curious. What are the strong segments? What are the weaker segments now that you have more data, I guess?
Yes. Well, people are more buying essential purchases. What do I mean by essential purchases? No? Things that they need to be able to navigate the pandemic life. What are these? You see health and wellness product, productivity at home, like for example, baking kits. Wonder Baker, one of our tenants, is doing extremely well. You would always see a queue outside the store. Healthy Options is doing extremely well. Watson's, hardware, domestic hobbies, comfort food. These are the ones that are doing exceptionally well. Well, a lot of our retailers also pivoted. No, they are very fast in pivoting their business. Just like, for example, I'll give an example. No, the Bench Group. The Bench used to be a casual wear casual wear store. No, now they came up with a Bench Active that sells sportswear, because we all know that sports has taken a lot of interest recently. They even sell bikes in their stores. No, so a lot of these things have happened in the past few months, and you will definitely see who are the ones that are very aggressive and who are not among the retailers.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks for that very concise summary. I'm definitely a fan of, and have become quite dependent on, Healthy Options over the past 8 months.
Well, I give you another example, Jun. No, we all know that Uniqlo is doing extremely well by this time. No, because we all know that Uniqlo is something that they have loungewear, pajamas, innerwears, and all these things. So they're selling quite good. Even their sports and leisure wear is doing extremely good. But they've pivoted in selling also face masks. There are a recent face mask in the market right now that you could buy. No, so those are the innovation that I could really cite on, good innovation that companies do nowadays during the pandemic.
Okay, and it's quite interesting. There are segments that are actually weak, and there are segments that are actually thriving under these conditions. If you look at the retail landscape outside, I think a common thread there was that fast fashion was challenged, obviously, because you're not out as much. You don't need to have that many clothes or variety of clothes. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Fast fashion is challenged. On the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, durable goods are doing very well. So that's something that is you would say is the case here as well.
Yes, you are correct, Jun. No, but however, the likes of Uniqlo is a form of fast fashion. It's also a form of fast fashion. No, but you just see how brands innovate. I don't think that it is a matter of segment, but it's a matter of how you navigate or how you adapt and change immediately and fast.
Thank you, Steven. Are there, you mentioned baking products and a couple of others. What would you say are the most unique emerging segments in the market? Because we've had athleisure early on, and yeah, I'm curious. Are there anything that hobbies? Okay.
Yeah, hobbies are because it's for their, sometimes people do go into hobbies because of their sanity, of their mental well-being, right? So a lot of seniors are not allowed to go out, or a lot of kids. So the parents or their children would buy these things for them, so that they could keep busy. They could keep the kids busy at home, things to do like that. Not like esports gaming is also something that is selling very well. Gaming in general, is doing extremely well. So all these hobbies is quite good at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think everyone will probably have their own story of something new they did over the last 8 months that they never thought they'd be doing. I never thought I'd be doing something like this, interviewing very interesting people like you and a host of others. But how about the competitive landscape in retail? Is there how is that changing in your perception?
Competition nowadays is no longer, or this A brand is competing with this B brand, no? And it's not just also in brick and mortar, but it's also online, because online in e-commerce, you have a sea of retailers. You have a huge number of retailers. You have to compete with with everyone, right? So it's no longer just online, it's or offline, but it's also online. But at the same time, I think in the context of inside the mall, it's also how you're able to present your brand. What's the brand story? What is the customer experience that you are able to give as an added value to against your competitors? No, before it's all about your product is better than theirs or their product is better than yours. It's no longer that. It has to do with customer experience.
Thanks. Very, very interesting insights, Steven. You mentioned online. I'm curious. We're going to talk about online, brick and mortar, omni-channel, all of these terms and buzzwords later, a bit later. But since you mentioned online, how much is online sales now for your group? And where do you see this? Where do you see this going in perhaps 3 years?
Okay. For our group, no. Well, it's not just the mall who has we the mall, no, have launched recently our virtual mall SM Malls online. No, we launched it a couple of like I think October 15 last 2 months ago, but we just beta launch it for Mega Mall, and we will be rolling it out this month in Mall of Asia in North EDSA. But it is still at a very low single digit. It's still quite low. But even in general, I think the whole Philippine retail environment, we're still at a single digit. No, it's not even 10% of the retail market. No, but I see that this will be growing. I'm not denying that it will never happen. But as you've seen in China also, which is also a very mature market for e-commerce, we have malls, shopping centers in China. No. So it is a very mature e-commerce market. But they cap it at only around 20 to 25% max. No, and it's not growing anymore. It's still at the 20% cap. So I feel that in the next 3 years we might reach maybe 10%, and it definitely will grow in the next 5 to 10 years. But I think it will still be maximum of 20%.
Maximum 20% from low double digits today.
Yes.
Of total sales. Okay, so it's again, thank you for that. It's super interesting you mentioned China, because I think one piece of data that other people are not talking much about is after the SARS episode. I think that was 2002, 2003. Two Chinese companies saw that e-commerce was going to be huge, and it's something they had to transform into. And these were Alibaba and I think JD.com. So what they did was Alibaba went from B2C to B2B, and they put on a platform. And 2 years later, I think they sold something like $1.5 billion worth of B2C and B2B sales. JD.com started selling on WeChat, I think, and it's interesting you say China, because now they're at 25%. They're capping at 25%. Back then, I think they were at the level at which we're at today.
Yes.
So at low single digits. So it's amazing how, of course, people have their own experiences over the last 8 months, but how this can be a catalyst for change. And we've seen that in China, and you thank you for bringing that forward. So we'll talk about e-commerce and brick and mortar in a bit, but just to maybe round up the discussion on the check-in on Philippine retail, what is for you your biggest lesson for 2020, or maybe I'll shorten it, over the last 8 months, and how do you emerge stronger from this?
Okay, my biggest lesson for 2020, I think, is all retailers have to adapt fast. You cannot take your sweet time. You have to be fast and you have to be agile, no? And because there's no playbook for the ongoing pandemic, you just really have to embrace it. And you cannot wait. You cannot say that the vaccine is coming. Let's wait for the vaccine. The vaccine will bring back the what was before. No, let's not wait for the vaccine. You really have to change. You really have to adapt. You have to really pivot your business, innovate, and move on. That's really my biggest lesson that I've learned in the pandemic. And if I would give a suggestion to all our retailers, that's really a something that I would want to share.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, why wait for the vaccine? Don't wait in terms of strengthening your immune system or eating healthy or sleeping right. So those are things you already can do something about right now. So it seems from what you've mentioned from the check-in that 2020 has not really driven any dramatic change in behavior, but it's merely accelerating what were already existing trends in retail. Is that an accurate interpretation of what you mentioned?
Yes, that's true. Because we have planned for our virtual mall online. Even started we started that late last year. Putting a virtual mall is not easy. It's not like a month you can do it. So we've been doing it since last year, no? It's just that we accelerated all these programs because of the pandemic, no? Because people want our shoppers wanted options. They are asking for more options, whether it's personal shopper assistance, whether it's the Viber community, whether it's delivery, whether it's you call someone, like for example, the SM store, you could just call a number and then they will shop for you and have it delivered to your house, because sometimes people would wanted to see it and they would just show it and demonstrate it there. So there's a lot of new ways of shopping, and I think this pandemic has accelerated that so much.
They say it's this situation, these lockdowns, this crisis has pushed us 5 years forward. So no dramatic change, but it's pushed us 5 years forward in 5 minutes, so to speak. So
yes, that's true.
All of that said, when do you think, and if you don't mind my asking, Supermalls will reach or exceed 2019 sales levels?
Okay. We are expecting that we are expecting it to fully recovered by latter part next year, no? By 2021, maybe last quarter. That is our projection, no? To already be at the 2019 level. 2019 was a banner year. I tell you, it was a good year for retailers. We were very, very happy with the numbers, both in terms of rental revenue and in terms of sales of our tenants, no? Demand was very high. The demand has not gone down now for spaces. Mind you, Jun, we have a lot of new brands that are still entering the market. A lot of global brands are still knocking on our doors. So I think there would be a shift in terms of tenancy, but I just feel that by hopefully by latter part next year we would already go back to 2019 level.
What do you think, Steven, is the biggest challenge to getting back to 2019 level revenue by the first half or at the end of the first half of 2021?
Okay, the biggest challenge is really restrictions, the government restrictions, and also mobility, transportation. That really affect. We are very dependent on the transportation around the metro. No, mobility will affect foot traffic and cost, and also customer confidence. Customer confidence is also something that we really have to work on.
Thank you, Steven. So maybe going into maybe drilling down into your how you what you're seeing and how you're managing the malls. May I ask, what is your operating focus for 2021?
To get the customers back. That's the number one. Bringing customers back to our malls, no, and keeping the quality of the customer experience. That's number two. What I could also think of is maybe refreshing some tenancy mix. As I've said earlier, there's a lot of new applicants. There's a lot of new products that are being offered. So we will not just sit back and wait for people to apply, but to also aggressively seek for new and exciting products that we could offer our shoppers. No. Lastly, and also one of the most important focus that we will do is to the development or accelerating the development of omni-channel for us.
Thanks, Steven. So could you talk about the tenancy mix you mentioned earlier? Does that involve changing the contracts also for the tenants, or a different? What are the, if it's okay to ask, what are the refinements you guys will have in terms of the tenants, and you've been helping them out, I think 2 months without rent, right? But could you speak to that a little bit? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. We treat our tenants not just as tenants, but as partners. Because if they do well, we do well. If they don't do well, we do not do well. So during the pandemic, as a matter of during the lockdown, the first when we first had our lockdown March 16, I remember vividly. March 18, my boss calls for a meeting. He called for a meeting, and we were at the board, and then he says that, okay, first, what are we going to do with our service providers and our employees? So management decided, give them full salary. Salary has to be given full even if they don't report to work. No, so that was the first thing that we did. No, and for our service providers, even the likes of the janitors and the security guards, we gave them allowance. No, I think they were given per month 5,000 pesos allowance. All the janitors and the security guards, even if they don't report for work. No, if they report to work, that's on top of that. No. But of course, the second thing that we think of is also our tenant partners. Our tenants are very important. They are I would say, the soul of a mall. No, without them, we are nothing. So tenants are very important to us. That's why we immediately decided on giving them rent free for 2 months. No, for the time that we were closed. No. This has never happened in the history of SM for the past 60 years. Now, that was the first time. The government didn't even mandate us to do that. We decided it the management or the board decided it without always thinking for our tenants. No, so even after that, until now, we're only charging variable rent, meaning whatever they sell, we just get a certain percentage from them. We do not charge them any more basic rent or the minimum rent. No, before the tenant, the scheme normally would be like, for example, 1,000 pesos per square meter, and then plus a certain percentage of their sales. No, it used to be like that, but this year, just to help them out, just to get them through this, so that in return, they could also help their suppliers, they could also help their own employees. So it's like it's a chain reaction. You know what I've learned also from this pandemic is we are all interconnected. We are all interconnected with each other. So if you help your tenants, the tenants will help their employees, their suppliers, their contractors. So until now, we have been doing that. No? And even for next year, I think we have a program also to still help them through throughout the year, no? Until such time that we're able to recover.
Right. Thank you, Steven. I was supposed to ask you now about the omni-channel strategy. And by the way, I hope it's okay if we extend to around 3:10 or 3:15, because I think while it's hot, let's keep the conversation going. If it's fine with you, Steven.
Yes, of course.
Really enjoying your insights. I was going to ask you about omni-channel, go into omni-channel, but since you mentioned a very important word, connection or connecting, and I think we talked about it earlier also when we opened. Hence the question now: what is SM? What are you in particular hearing from your customers? What is that thing that you're hearing most from your customers right now that you need to
communication
integrate?
Communication with your customers are very important. No, Meaning customers, we have two kinds of customers. No? We have the regular customers that go into your malls and they shop, but also our tenants are also a form of customers. No? So in the side of the customers, no? Again, as I've mentioned earlier, they want options. They want options. There are still some people who are not comfortable in going to the malls, which is fine, which is okay. You have to provide them other channels of shopping. Nowadays, brands, as I've read once, brands have to be shoppable and shippable. A brand has to be shoppable and shippable. So in the customer side, I think that is something that we are working on very closely with our customers with our e-commerce group, no, to be able to reach as many customers as possible, whether online or offline. Okay.
Thank you, Steven.
In terms of tenancy, we also guide them how to get through this pandemic. To tell you honestly, in the beginning, tenants were also at a loss on how to reopen their business. Closing a business is easy. It was very easy to just close your door. But how do you reopen it? That's also a very challenging part of what they are doing. No? So we came up with a playbook where we came up with guidelines on how to go about safe malling, how the restaurants, what should they do, and all these things. No? So you have to guide them and hold their hands together to reopen their business. No? A lot of them, especially right now during Christmas season, you've mentioned a while ago, what are we gonna do for what are we expecting? No? So we have also met with a lot of our tenants already, asking them to maybe pre-pack and so that people could shop faster. When they go to a toy store, for example, there are already top 10 choices. These are the top 10 choices for girls, and these are the top 10 choices for boys, and it's already pre-packed. So it's already gift wrapped, so you don't have to wait in line. They wrap it for you. So these are all the new things that we are also introducing: customer experience, customer safety, at the same time, customer convenience. So you have to really listen to them, listen to your customers, listen to your tenants. That's how you do your business nowadays.
Thank you, Steven, for that those insights. So now let's go into marketing. We talked about operating focus, tenancy. Now, how about marketing? And what one word that has come up a lot when we started talking is omni-channel as a retail tool. So could you? It's one of those buzzwords, but it's apparently a big word today because a lot of people are doing it. Could you define your omni-channel strategy and how do you integrate online with brick and mortar?
Okay, it's omni-channel means that different channels, different ways to reach your customers. No, I personally believe that retailers now has to be present, as a matter of fact, in all media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or nowadays you even have Leica. So you have to be present in all these media platform. No? So it's the same thing with omnichannel. You don't just offer them online, but you also give them a place where they could see, feel, and touch. Filipinos are very tactile. Filipinos also want to be with, I think it's because of our during the Spanish times where people congregate in the plazas. So the shopping centers are the modern day plazas. No, so they really love going to shopping centers. As proven in the past few weeks that people are started to go back again, no, to malls. No, but again, it's a matter of giving them options, giving them channels and venues and avenues to shop. So that is all about omnichannel. No one is going to replace one. Online will never replace offline, and offline will not replace online. So it has to complement. For a brand to be successful, you have to have both.
Thank you, Steven. So yeah, and we'll talk about both. Just maybe for a time check, we'll end the questions at about 3:05 or 3:06, and then we'll open up the floor to questions around 3:06. It's now 2:59, so I'll be rounding up my questions. So before we go into physical retail and online, maybe physical. Let's go into physical retail now. Could you please describe your what do you think of the what's your sense of the evolving role of the physical retail store? In the past, it was discovery, it was distribution, essentially, in the past. Now, what is it? How is it? Where is it evolving now?
Okay, physical store will play a very strong role in with respect to curation, with respect to discovery and also experience. No, this is for you. Physical stores would you should be able to tell your story in a physical store, which you really cannot achieve online. In a physical store, it's not just a place for you to just buy things and go, but it's also for you an opportunity to tell your story to your consumer, to connect with your consumer, to be able to tell them this is what product is this. Like for example, for makeups, we recently opened a mega store in Aura, SM Aura, called Look. A lot of people would check online and then go to the store to check what if that color or that shade of lipstick is applicable to them or not. That you really cannot get online. So a lot of this experience you can achieve offline or in a physical store. You have to make sure that you benefit from it.
Thank you, Steven. Last question on the physical store. Are you planning to reduce the branches or reduce the expansion of the SM malls? And then we'll go into online, some questions on online.
Okay. No, we're not going to reduce our footprint. As a matter of fact, recently we have just opened SM City Butuan in Mindanao, and we're opening also our SM City Zamboanga in a few days. So we're still opening. We have moved some openings of 2020 to 2021, not because we don't want to. It's because of the lockdown that construction was halted for a couple of months. That's why it was pushed back. But all systems go. We're still expanding. We will be opening around 5 malls next year. We have one in Caloocan, or Grand Central in Caloocan, the former Ever Gotesco. We will open that latter part next year. So a lot of exciting openings is still for us, no, for the next few years. We have not changed our plan. We have only we reassess on the formats. We reassess on what the tenancy mix and what's the physical store, the role of the physical store now vis-a-vis our online store itself.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Steven. So does that as reassessment mean smaller stores, or
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. I'll give an example. No, our cinemas, we have reduced the size of our cinema, not because it's not profitable, but because it's more efficient for us to reduce the size of the cinema. However, there are still some brands that are expanding. Like for example, Pet Express. This Pet Express is a pet store of SM. I recently received a call from them asking if they could get a 1,500 or 2,000 square meter format, a Pet Express superstore. So a lot of the retailers are also expanding their business because it's doing extremely well. Ace Hardware is still very bullish and wanted to get more spaces. So it's reassessing, looking at what are the concepts that are working and what are the concepts that are not.
Thank you, Steven. I think Phil Hagedorn will ask you one question because it's related to what you just mentioned. So can you please bring in Phil, and then Phil, we will go back. We'll go into online. We'll talk about online for 5 minutes, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just want to, just because it's pretty much about the subject I wanted to talk about. I want to share a slide here. I don't know if you can see it. Just let me know when you can.
Okay.
I just noticed now that Stephen, well, thank you first for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate all your insights. No? But on these physical stores, I noticed in Cavite recently, you're building a new mall in Tanza,
Yes.
which is about 2 kilometers away from a current facility you have. No? So I'm curious, I mean, one thing we admire are companies that are investing in CAPEX this year, because many people have really held back on that. And where we think you're investing, it means it's very important for you, no? In the way we think. And related maybe to this idea of physical stores, I find this an aggressive move, and I'm curious what you're seeing in an area like Cavite, where you have 2 locations that are very close to each other, and how that's going to work. Because as you can see right down the road here on the right is also a Robinson's Mall. So these are new areas. I'm wondering what you're seeing and why the aggressive move into some of these spots.
Okay. Before we open or a mall, no, normally our SM Prime would give us a list of available lots that we have. And then with that, we study the market. But it's not just the current market that we look into, but also what is it 5 years from now or 10 years from now. No, we all know that Cavite is a densely populated area. Our Rosario Cavite, I think you were referring to Rosario Cavite, the other one. No, it's a smaller, much smaller mall than the one that we will be putting in Tanza. Tanza, we feel that the market is a very strong market. Our location is extremely well. It's a very good location. So we feel that in around 5 years' time, it definitely will mature, and it will have market for two shopping centers in the area. It's densely populated, Cavite.
Super. No, so I mean, that's an example of you not having to need a huge property. And putting multiple smaller operations relatively close to each other.
Yes. Phil, I'll give you an example. No, when Ortigas Center opened, Mega Mall opened, no, there was already a plot of Robinsons beside us, and you also have Shangri-La Mall beside us, and there's a Star Mall, or it used to be called Manuela, across us. There were like maybe during that time 4 or 5 shopping centers around us, but you see Mega Mall is doing extremely well, no? And during the time when we opened our Mega Mall, there was nothing in Ortigas Center. There was just maybe ADB, Tektite. That's basically it, no?
Well, I look at it a little bigger than that, because when SM moves into a town, it means that the town is really on the up. And and I think I'm just happy to see that investments continue to move in areas like this, that you're still confident that and maybe the timing is perfect, that you're building this and it'll be ready when things start to normalize. So congratulations, and June, thank you for letting me butt in and asking a question.
Phil,
No, keep going. We'll open it up. You can moderate the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you asked that question, because that gives me an opportunity to also explain, no, all the indicators that we look into prior to deciding which mall to prioritize and which mall not to prioritize. We have locations that we did not push through with because it's the market's not ripe yet for us to enter. But there are a lot of indicators that we look into, not just currently, but also for the next 5 or 10 years.
Thank you, Steven.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for the question, Phil. So now let's dive into the online business, Steven, if that's fine. And thank you for your insights there. So maybe very quickly, I just got word that we have to open up the Q&A in a few minutes, but just need to ask about online first. Could you talk about investments in digital marketing? What is your philosophy? And what kind of a role is that playing for you guys? And how do you measure success and incentivize? Thank you.
Okay. Actually, the reason why we went to online shopping is also to protect our main business now, which is shopping center. We don't want it to be diluted to other platform. So that's also the reason why we have that is to complement our existing shopping center. That's not going to be our main bread and butter, I believe, but it's really to complement and to assess or to help to assist our tenants, no, to have multiple channels, because some of our tenants or some of the brands inside our malls are not ready to go into the other platforms yet, no. So maybe they would feel more comfortable since they know how we work, is to give them avenue and to give them channel to also show their wares online.
Thank you, Steven. When things go back to full strength, are there any key changes you need to make in your systems, processes, incentives, and strategy, or are they all in place already for the SM Supermalls?
Malls has always been evolving. This is something that we have been doing not just because of the pandemic, but ever since. No, I'll give you an example. When I joined SM in 2004, our tenancy mix for food was only as low as less than 5%. Less than 5% of our tenancy is food. But now the tenancy mix in our malls are nearly 30%. Before, you don't even see the likes of Manam or Din Tai Fung or some Thai casual dining Thai restaurants. SM used to be in the 90s a very purposeful mall, a very efficient, purposeful. You go, you shop, and then you leave. You have the likes of the Jollibee and the McDonald's and all these fast food chains, but it's not a place for you to hang out and to stay and meet up with friends. But now it has already evolved into that. We have become a lifestyle centers, right? I think it begins when we opened our SM Aura Mall, and then you have the Mega Fashion Hall and all these changes that we have been doing. So SM has always been evolving, and it will always evolve. It will always change. It will always adapt to the current market situation. We listen to our customers intently, very closely, and work with our tenants to make sure that our shopping center stays relevant.
Thank you, Steven. So if I may ask now about, well, first of all, I agree with that. And early on, when you talked about the role of the physical store, I think the biggest testament to the continued relevance of the physical store is the fact that tech companies and online retailers that didn't have stores in the first place are actually opening physical stores currently. But maybe after you talked about online already and brick and mortar, capital management for the SM Supermall Group, are you planning to do the real estate investment trust issuance soon, or is that something you're not so keen on doing? What is the plan for SM REITs?
Okay. We have been discussing that. SM Prime has been discussing that, no, for our mall assets, no. But I don't think that this is the right time to do it. Maybe in due time, but we're keeping the conversation very warm. We're still looking at it, and I'm sure that in the right time we will launch that.
Thank you, Steven. One last question, or two last questions on housekeeping, ESG questions, or environmental, social, and governance. Could you talk about any supply chain challenges, and how do you maintain harmonious and nurture relationships with your supply chain, especially during these difficult periods? And second is, could you talk about very briefly on energy management for SM?
Okay. I think what you mentioned about it's all about win-win situation, no? With that, whether you're with the suppliers or your tenants, no. That's why, as I've explained to you earlier, no, we really assisted them. Our main suppliers or our main contractors, I would say, are the tenants. So you assist them in times of difficult times, so that they will support you. They would always stay with you. That's why if you would see the closure of our tenancy is at a very, very low single digit, or even less than 1% have signified closing of their stores with us. No, very low. Because also of the assistance we have given them. No, so it's all about a win-win situation for everyone, not just us, but also for our tenants, our contractors, and our suppliers. No, that's to answer your first question. The second question is about environment. No, you know, Mr.
Energy
Hans,
management.
yeah, Mr. Hans C is a very strong leader in terms of disaster resilience. He's part of the United Nations Committee, no, and we have been doing all this even prior to all these typhoons coming in. You know, since the early 90s, we have been recycling our water already. The ones that you use, we water with the water that we use to water our plants and also to flush our toilets are all recycled water. You know, in an area we feel that it is a flood prone area, even before construction, we study that very carefully. That's the reason why in areas that are heavily flooded, we are never flooded, no? Because, for example, Marcos Highway, we all know that Marcos Highway is always flooded. However, when we put up SM City Masinag, we underneath SM City Masinag, it has 18,000 cubic meter of water catchment basin. What is a water catchment basin? It is like when it rains and it floods, you catch all the water in underneath your mall, and only in coordination with DPWH, after the flooding and after the typhoon, you release it gradually. So it mitigates, or it helps the area not to be flooded. No, so these things we have been doing. We've changed all our lights into LED. Um, the lights that you see in the malls are all LEDs. No, so this is something that is very important to us, because we feel that doing business, you have to do it responsibly.
Thank you. And maybe I'll get with you offline on some questions on plastic usage and all that. But given the limited time, maybe an integration that will open up to Q&A. Thank you so much for your insight, Steven. We'll open up the Q&A, but before that, we'll try to tie in everything that you've said. Retail has come a long way from its humble brick and mortar beginnings that SM played a large part in. It has steadily evolved to focus more on customer experience, something that you have imbued into the malls, the SM malls, from your previous professional experience when you came in. And this is something that is now serving you guys very well amid rapidly shifting customer behavior. The situation has hit the Philippine economy hard, emphasizing your biggest lesson was the need for agile and adaptable retailers, and not only accelerated what has already been you've been anticipating for a long time, but an omni-channel retail strategy and more customer experience oriented mall going experience, for lack of a better word. The stores and shops may look a bit different, but malls will remain central to Philippine communities, serving as modern-day plazas, and e-commerce will not replace, but instead amplify retail sales for SM's tenants and help them along in their recovery. From the trough in May, consumption is well on its way to recover as we enter the holiday season and into 2021. And while retail and consumer preferences may look different, SM malls will continue to adapt and stay true to your consumer-centric essence, and that's essentially what you mentioned. So that said, I guess I wanted to again thank you, Steven, for all of your insights. We can email you the questions or get back with you on the questions later after the call. And if there are questions that I haven't, apologize, I don't see on my screen right now. We will get back and answer your questions as soon as we can after the webcast. So Steven, thank you very much. Would you like to relay any parting messages for those who a lot of people have actually tuned in to listen to you? Thank you.
Okay. You know, I just want to assure everyone that retail is here to stay. It's just how, what, where they shop will reshape the future of retail.
Thank you so much, Steven. Really an absolute pleasure having you here, and I will turn you back over. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will turn you right back to Bea.
We'd like to thank Mr. Tarrobago and Mr. Tan for their insights and the audience for their questions. I would like to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar will be released to all of you, as well as posted on our social media pages. We have more webinars lined up for December. Please visit our social media pages for more information. We would also like to invite you to join ATRAM's new official Viber community group, #ATRAMPH Community, to stay updated on the latest announcements, advisories, and reminders. To join, scan the QR code or visit the link on your screen. Lastly, we hope you can spend a couple of minutes to answer the survey at the end of the session to ensure that these updates remain relevant and useful. We appreciate the time you've taken to join us today, and on behalf of ATRAM, I would like to wish for the safety of you and your family. Best of luck, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.